Can everyone see my screen? Getting some thumbs up. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Product Analytics Sync for the last day of January 23. I'll kick us off by walking the bold board. In open issues, we have the first one is ignore ClickHouse connection string application setting that is assigned to Max. Anything to mention there?
No, I've just pushed a fix for it. Well, I pushed a change to it to CI. Just wait to see how that goes. Feel free to attach workflow in dev because I'm looking at it now.
Okay, and then the next one you have as well.
Yeah, I mentioned it later in the agenda, but I'm not entirely sure how to fix it without reworking quite a lot of the session stuff. So let's discuss in a bit about how much work we want to put into that right now and how important it is.
Cool, sounds good. Then the last one is unassigned for at product analytics application setting for collector host. I'm guessing this is also related, or maybe not. Anything?
No, this is for kind of the instructions that we're pointing to the wrong host. And I have a later point to kind of quickly just provide an illustration of how the Jitsi images are different in terms of the configurator and the server itself. So at some point I submitted a merge request. I haven't gotten back to it yet, but there's a pretty hacky solution in terms of changing the URL, but that doesn't work when people are self-managing their clusters and decide to call their edge server, the thing that actually collects the events, something else besides collector. So this is a additional application setting that we would need to define. We're not using it anywhere other than for informational purposes, which would be quite useful, especially at the instance level, to be able to say, hey, when you send events, you need to send it to this host and not the configurator, because the configurator is only responsible for configuring sources and destinations and API keys. So that's the issue for that.
Gotcha. Thanks for adding context. Then we have two planning breakdown issues. This API to retrieve is, yeah, I will take a look at this again, so I'll assign myself. This is related to creating a backend way of retrieving the product analytics state, just for context. Then Axel, you have the next one for update learner set up so that it actually publishes the packages.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm working on it. I'm investigating the solution. That the status of that issue is actually solution validation. It's just that I didn't saw it in the board, so I left it on planning breakdown. But I just noticed that we have a couple of issues on the open column, which are in solution validation. So I updated it after the call. And yeah, to get it to the point, yeah, I'm working on it. I saw that Rod left his comments as well. So yeah, I'm going to try to find probably taking a look at other package developed by GitLab. So yeah.
Cool. By the way, I love the issue name so that it actually publishes.
Well, right now it doesn't do anything at all.
Then in the ready for development column, we have two unassigned issues. Anything anyone would like to say about this?
Do you want to assign the widgets panels to me? I should be able to pick that up today, if not first thing tomorrow.
And the second one, we have an agenda point to discuss later on, so we can skip that for now.
Yeah.
Cool. I have the first in dev one. This is adding a date range filters to the dashboards. I have the front end working. Also demo this later, or during I'll make like a recording and post it on the Slack channel. But yeah, we also have a agenda item to discuss the blocker in terms of getting the queries working for this. The next one, we have the audience dashboard. I don't know if there's anything we need to discuss here, because I think this is reliant on like the UX bugs and polish and stuff that we need to do for this.
Yep.
All right. The same for the behavior dashboard, I believe, unless there's anything. Yeah. Okay, I'm seeing a nodding head. And then Max, you have the next one.
Yeah, it's kind of related to the point that Dennis has raised later in the agenda, so we'll come back to it.
All right, and then the spike after that, yours as well.
I don't know how far Sam and Dennis, I guess we should probably have a conversation about this. I've sort of proposed the two possible solutions to this. One is easy but not necessarily fully featured, and the second is harder but more scalable. So we're in a position now where we can define an implementation plan, but it'd be good to get your input on that issue.
Yeah, I saw you had posted the second option a few days back, so I'll try to take a look. Or if we want to schedule a session, please feel free to put it on my calendar.
Okay.
Well, Dennis, you have the next two.
Cool. Yeah, so I think I've explained the data persistence one for Redis quite a bit. So basically, whenever the pod and the Kubernetes node goes down, it basically forgets all the configuration information, so we can set up a volume so it can save that before anything happens, or when pods get rebuilt. I can push that out, but I'm testing basically because you might have seen in the channel, we're talking about the public handbook and how much traffic that's receiving. And so I'm kind of combining this with, or this has to be changed a little bit because ideally the Redis servers are going to be working in replication mode, and there's going to be more than even one of those. So the long story short there is that the data persistence configuration may change as I scale Redis out to be replicated and multi-node. So yeah. The other one is a competitive analysis. This is in support of a fiscal year 22 Q4 OKR in terms of just kind of performing a bit of analysis to see if there are any quick wins in terms of iterating towards that. This doesn't particularly apply. This is all groups that have been performing this analysis. It doesn't particularly apply to product analytics because we're competing with ourselves and getting off the ground with just having nothing versus something. But I did get a start on this to compare against some of the bigger solutions out there, namely Mixpanel, Amplitude, and Google Analytics. And we can revisit that with other point solutions as well to see, once we get out to the customer preview or even out of beta into actually, general availability, how we stack up against them and what we can do to kind of make up for any gaps in competitiveness. That's it.
Oh, sounds insightful. Then Axel, you have the next two.
Yeah, so these two are in review, and alongside the learner related, the publishing related issue, we have like all of the scheduled SDK issues that we have for this milestone. So yeah. And right after that, I'll probably jump into either one of the issues that we have ready for development, or one of the follow-ups that were left after merging the onboarding issues.
Well, I did take a look at the both MRs for this, and both look good. Just have some minor feedback about what we can do on the docs and so on, but both look ready to merge for me.
Yeah, naming and yeah, go ahead.
I need to just reiterate the deployment up to NPM is a manual process. So once those two are merged, I'm happy to handle doing that for now until we get this learner stuff sorted.
Yeah. And I was about to say that, yeah, the hardest part about working on these two were naming and documenting. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, naming things is hard. Rob, you have one in verification.
Yep, thank you, Max, for merging that this morning. This adds the dashboards item to the analytics submenu. It will point to product analytics, our existing dashboard listing for now. There is a discussion going on around creating a separate listing and migrating everything over. So that's a future conversation. It's behind a feature flag, which is also documented. So if you'd like to enable that so you can actually have a menu item, feel free.
That is awesome that we finally have a menu item though. And then Max, you have the next one.
Yeah, this is done in verification. We need to get the funnel schema into the production cluster so I can actually close this. It's done to all intents and purposes, but I've not been able to test it in production yet.
All right.
Yeah, let me try to get the staging cluster put up together first, and then we can test it there. Because we could test it in production, but then basically if something goes wrong, then all queue requests start failing. So
yeah, no, it's super risky. Yeah. That makes sense. It can sit there in verification for now.
Okay.
Cool. Then we have quite a lot of closed issues. So Axel, you have the first two. Anything you would like to say about that?
Yeah, those two are related to the onboarding flow. Like yesterday, I tried to break it on locally, and everything looked really good. So I'm really happy with the result. Those two tasks are those two first tasks are related to the same amount.
Cool. I think we can skip the confidential one. Might need to also edit this out of the recording then.
No, it's fine.
Confidential.
It's
Okay.
it's pretty generic, and it's confidential just because it was during the internal preview and happening with the internal handbook. But I mean, Max, I think
If
you
you
can
don't look
speak
at
of
the
it generally.
If you don't look at the screenshots in the issue, I think it's fine to talk about
Okay.
internal handbook data inside all the screenshots.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the thing it fixed, there was intermittent errors when loading dashboards due to it being over generous in how many access tokens it was generating on every kube request. So we reduced that scope dramatically. So yeah, no longer happening.
Cool. And Rob, you have the next two if you're available.
Sorry, phone call I had to take. The next, this was just updating the documentation to make sure that we are properly documenting the stack we currently use and what feature flags are being used and where.
And then also add stack to production analytics docs. Cool. Right, I'll add a bookmark and we can carry on to the next one. The next agenda item. That is you, Dennis.
Yeah, I'm trying to resize the window right now. It's pretty more difficult than I thought. There we go. Cool. So I just wanted to quickly kind of give an overview of the Jitsi like infrastructure in production versus development. The TLDR, but I'll just show a quick screenshot of it as well. And this is what I'm slowly building out in terms of data persistence, is that you have a couple of different services that are standing between, user sending events and the ClickHouse data store, which is in this example, the destination database. In development in our dev kit, for the sake of convenience, we have the server which receives the events and sends it to the database, as well as the configurator, which configures basically where the destinations, the sources, does any enriching instruction. Those are combined as one image and develop in the dev kit for the sake of simplicity. That's why when you go to the Jitsi server, you just add /configurator and you can go in there and do stuff. In a production deployment, you don't need many configurator services because all you need to do is just define it once. It saves it in Redis, that replicates and does it what it needs to do in a cluster environment. And then the server is actually hit Redis to know, okay, I've received this key, where does it go? They all go to ClickHouse, but in this case, what database does it go to? And so in terms of actually scaling this out, you would seldom need more than one configurator. But you would scale Redis out because that's the job queue and that stores all the different configuration. That's what stores all the like analytical data as well in the dashboards for Jitsi in terms of how much data we're receiving. And then you would actually scale out the Jitsi, I call them the edge servers or the servers themselves that collect the events and send them out. So then you can have n number of these basically to support how much traffic you're getting, per second, per minute. And then that would sit behind a load balancer. So that's why I created the issues to have them named separately, because in the production environment, they're at different hosts. So the load balancer currently is like collector dot, and then whatever the stack number is, and then glproductanalytics.com. And then the configurator is just a single server that, again, just defines a lot of configuration between the two. But I just kind of wanted to illustrate that just so that we're to give a little bit more context as to why server and configurator are separate. And I'll stop there for any questions. Cool. If you ever look at this too, actually configurator is an optional step here. It's just easy because it provides us an API for us to, as we do the stack initialization thing that Max and everyone's worked on in terms of the onboarding flow, it gives us an easy way to add the destinations and set up the connection for that. Alternatively, you can just define a YAML file and they can pull, the servers can pull from that. But the configurator makes it a lot easier in terms of, we actually talked about that a little bit yesterday in terms of how do we automate that, and the configurator actually gives us a lot of that automation for free. So there's a little bit more context behind that. I will stop sharing my screen. And yeah, this is, I think, a shorter, a very short note, just so that I wouldn't forget to mention it, but this is a question to everybody. We have a lot of references to Jitsi in our code. We are exploring alternative options, whether we build our own versus, use Snowplow or things like that. So I will rephrase or add a little bit more detail into what I think we should do in terms of like internal references to Jitsi. I think we should remove. So for example, like Jitsi host, for example, would be like collector or collector configurator host or something like that. Now, for the purposes of what's user facing, it would be beneficial if they're standing up their own clusters. Like if we tell them what's the collector host and we have nothing in our infrastructure that says collector, then that would be confusing. The main reason behind this is I wouldn't want us to have, this database column called Jitsi host when it's like the Snowplow collector endpoint at some point. So if we can generalize it now, the same way we can kind of like, rename things from widget to panel earlier, then I think it will save us a little bit more work later on. So I would say like internal references to Jitsi, we would update, but I'm curious what everyone's thoughts on that would be.
I'm not entirely convinced because like you say, if we're saving something called Jitsi host, that is what it is. It is Jitsi's host. Nothing to say we couldn't have a database column for both that and for Snowplow. And then the application logic's job is then to figure out which one of those to use, rather than having collector host, because like you say, it's not entirely clear what that is referring to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a thought, because I know we're already removing like a lot of references in our schema and cube away from Jitsi.
Yeah, and I think that's right. In the sense, I think our front end shouldn't refer to Jitsi at all. As far as the end users are concerned, who are looking at the dashboards, Jitsi shouldn't exist as a term. But in terms of administrators who are setting up connections to various services, the Jitsi host is the host for Jitsi. And there's nothing to say as well that every service we connect to, so let's say we used something like Snowplow, that it would be a host name. It might be like a Unix socket or something like that, or a connection string that includes both some sort of login details, a database, and a port number. So it might have different validations on that field as well. So I'm just thinking if we over genericize that, it could be an issue.
No, that's fair. Thinking about it further, we have like the Jitsi project XID, and you wouldn't know that otherwise if it wasn't directly tied to Jitsi.
It
We
may
already
not
had
be
some confusion
necessary
around that already.
Like, yeah, we might get rid of that entirely if we move to Snowplow.
Exactly. Yeah.
So like if we were just using collector connection strings, so we can assume, because we all know that they're going to be roughly the same format and they're going to validate the same way and they're going to contain the same information, that's fine. And that works for ClickHouse, but it definitely doesn't work for Jitsi because we've got configurator URLs, we've got collector URLs, we've got project names, we've got project IDs. Yeah, there's a lot more possibilities there, and I don't know what we need for Snowplow either. So that's yeah, the MR I've got open is to remove all the user-facing references to Jitsi, which I think is definitely something we should do because that's just confusing. I think the non-user facing stuff might need some more thought depending on where it is we're hoping to go.
Yeah. Well, I think it seems like there's a general agreement on using the term collector at least. So for purposes of differentiating from my last agenda point, the difference between the configurator, and then we can at least call the other thing that collects the events the collector. Then we can keep the reference into Jitsi then, and at least add that additional field so that we know that there's a difference between the two different Jitsi services. So I'm good with that. Unless anyone else has any other thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, I was going to mention something similar to what Max said at the end, that a good first step might be to remove the user-facing terms that we know that are too general, like this discussion about Jitsu and collector. But I was wondering while I was looking at the admin section that if we, for example, remove the word Jitsu, then how are we informing the user that they should put a Jitsu poster? And
So let's
maybe-
clarify that. When we
Yeah.
say, I think Max, and correct me if I'm wrong, when we say user facing, we're talking about the end users for the dashboards
Correct.
and not the administrators. So in application settings, they would still see like Jitsu collector host and Jitsu configurator host.
Yeah, they're very different users. in
that
one.
makes, yeah,
You've got the
that
analytics,
makes more sense. Thank you.
the data team, and then you've got the GitLab administrators who are very different users.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my doubt.
Yeah, because if you go on like the query designer, for example, you'll start seeing like Jitsu effectively namespace dimensions and measures.
That's what we don't want anymore.
In your cluster configuration, you see like a Jitsu JS for the schema. We have a table called Jitsu. Do we? Yeah, we have a table called Jitsu. So like things like that.
Yeah.
That's
That's
more
stuff I'd like when
what
people
we're
are building their dashboards, they shouldn't be exposed to that, basically.
right. But in the purposes of administering a cluster, you are still standing up Jitsu services. So you need to know what information from Jitsu you need to put into application settings. So those settings would remain unchanged.
As an administrator, if I'm one of these, I don't know, admins that doesn't read the documentation, I want to go into admin and it says enter your Jitsu installation information. And I'm like, okay, well, I better go and install Jitsu then. Hopefully you've been slightly more methodical than that, but at least it's obvious what it is that we're looking for.
So are we talking about then at your visualization configuration level, removing references to Jitsu?
Yes, and that would be the work I'm doing as this MR. So the first
Okay.
part will be to alter the schema so that it no longer refers to Jitsu. And then we'll have to update the built-in dashboards for audience and behavior so that it now refers to the new.
So
new
it will be
schema,
like
which is
collector
attractive.
dots.
So there'll be two MRs.
But will it change to, will it still have a namespace or like a prefix? So will it be like collector dot first UA family? Because I'm just thinking, because we also have like sessions and potentially more that's being added. So is everything going to be collapsed like without that first bit, or yeah?
Have we decided on that yet, Max?
I'm a bit
Or should we-
confused
should
so
we
like how
decide
it
that
would
now?
work.
Uh-oh.
Oh, we lost Max.
I'm not sure how to answer that question. We could just
You
we
took
could just
right
use
out.
events or tracked events. I'm not particularly, we just need to generalize it is the main point. And events, I think, is an accurate representation. These are all events, but we
Okay,
can now
yeah.
check in with Max to see how he feels about it now that he said.
I think events make sense because then we can keep sessions and it'll, yeah.
Did you panic, quit, Max?
I have no idea what happened there. I think Zoom just completely crashed. Sorry.
Okay.
Was I needed for anything else in that conversation before I disappeared?
No, we wanted to, no, you definitely are needed in that conversation. So Jan was asking, like, we're renaming, we have it. So currently, like things like user agent and page name and doc path, those are namespace by Jitsu. So are we renaming that to events, or like, what is that? What is the new namespace?
Yes, so we're going to rename all of that to tracked events.
Okay.
So I don't know how much of what you heard before I disappeared. So there'll be two MRs, one to update the schema, and then one to update the currently built-in dashboards in GitLab itself to refer to those new schemas.
Okay. And that new namespace would be tracked events.
That's
Cool.
the aim, unless anyone has any strong opinions to another name, but that seems like a good one to me.
It's fine with me. Cool.
Right, we only have a minute left, so let's quickly try and talk about sessions.
Sorry, I'm just putting Zoom back in the right place. So yeah, Jan quite rightly pointed out that sessions aren't working with date ranges at the moment. That's because I followed Cube's tutorial on how to set up session analytics, which is not Git or ClickHouse. So it works, but it's I didn't realize that was a thing it didn't do. So there may well be a ClickHouse specific way to solve this. I don't know what it is yet. I'm more than happy to spend time and figure that out, but there's one backend engineer, so it's more a case of priorities and how much time we want to spend rewriting sessions so that we can use date range filters. I'm happy for it to be top priority. I just wanted to steer from the rest of the group on that.
What's top priority currently for you?
I'm looking at what is top priority for me at the moment? Renaming that, renaming the schema and exporting, and yeah, starting to look at sessions.
Sam, I don't know if you want us to like reevaluate tomorrow during like pre-planning, or I think exporting is pretty important, but then also like the date range is kind of a big control for all of these dashboards.
Yeah, so I put this in my comment on the issue. I don't think this is necessarily something we should consider a bug, but it is a piece of feature work we'll want to prioritize pretty highly. I'll need some time to think about where that would shake out in the stack rank to give you an answer. But
That's
yeah,
fine.
then-
But I guess the
then
answer I wanted right now is, should I drop everything and work on it? But yeah, it sounds like no, not yet.
In my mind, it's not a let's drop everything, work on it right now, unless I'm missing something. Otherwise, it seems like it'll be close to the top of the feature list, but not a P1, S1 sort of drop everything urgent issue.
That's fine. There's an element in here of, I don't entirely know what I'm doing. So there's going to be a fair amount of, thanks, Rob. There's going to be a fair amount of sort of figuring out how to solve this in the same way with funnels. So yeah, that sounds good.
I would say it's not an S1 bug perhaps, but it is a P1 feature, because I think, you know, based on if you were to set up instrumentation right now, you're just querying all of time right now. So it's a pretty critical piece of functionality. But if we're already midway through like renaming stuff away from Jitsi, then I don't know if it's worth like stopping everything. That's why I personally don't feel like it's a drop everything kind of issue.
And Jan can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think sessions work with date ranges as long as you're not segmenting by other dimensions. So total sessions, I'm pretty sure, work with a date range. Total sessions segmented by user agent don't work.
So I was just about to say that depending on how quickly this gets fixed, an option that we can consider is I can push this feature still, because it is behind a feature flag, 2 of the audience widgets will be broken if you select a date range. But I mean, that's maybe still fine, because then we can at least show what we've got, and it will be a good reminder to fix it.
I'm okay with that.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, then I'll carry on to get it merged.
And if we need to, Greco, feel free to use me as a resource for the back-end side of things if needed.
Sweet.
Well, in that case, we only have one read-only item left, so I think that's it for our agenda. Cool. Have a nice day. Ciao.
Thanks, Jan. Ciao.
Bye.